The first thing folks remembered was the sound. A sharp crack of hooves against the old wooden fence, rattling the rails and sending splinters across the dust. The crowd gathered at the edge of the county fairgrounds had never seen anything like it. The horse in the ring moved with a power that felt too big for the small arena, throwing its weight with wild, angry force. People whispered that it was cursed, that no rancher alive had been able to break it, that it carried the spirit of a storm deep in its chest. Others said it had been mistreated somewhere far from town and now trusted no one. Whatever the truth was, the animal had become the center of every conversation for miles. The fairgrounds were usually filled with laughter, with kids running between booths and ranchers showing off their best animals. But that day had a different tone. The air felt tight, stretched thin by tension. Dust floated lazily in the dry heat, catching the sunlight in dull glimmers. Every eye was fixed on the horse that had already thrown 3 riders that morning. Strong men who had broken wild mustangs and handled bucking mules walked away from the ring, rubbing their ribs or limping toward the medical tent. Yet each one refused to admit defeat, saying the horse had simply caught them off guard. But the truth was clear. The horse was untamable. Or at least it seemed that way. It was a tall, deep-bodied animal with a coat that looked almost silver under the sun. Its mane hung in long, tangled waves, and its muscles flexed with every restless movement. Each time someone stepped near the gate, it pinned its ears back, warning them as if it could see straight through their intentions. Even seasoned cowboys hesitated, shifting their hats and glancing around as if hoping someone else would step up first. No one wanted to be the next one thrown into the dust. A hush fell over the crowd when the announcer declared a bigger reward for anyone who could ride the horse for more than 10 seconds. People muttered, calculating in their minds what 10 seconds could mean. A few stepped forward, pride outweighing caution, but pride did not help them. One by one, each was thrown off almost before they settled in the saddle. The horse seemed to enjoy humiliating them, tossing riders with quick, sharp twists that left the audience wincing. Kids leaned over the fence rails, gripping the boards tight, their eyes wide with a mix of fear and excitement. Older folks shook their heads, claiming they had never seen a creature with that much fiery spirit. Some whispered that the horse had been brought in from the mountains where it lived alone, untouched by people, roaming the wild land with nothing but instinct guiding it. Others argued it came from a broken ranch where fences were thin and patience was thinner. A few ranchers who claimed to understand horses stepped closer, hoping to calm it. The animal only grew more restless, snorting loud enough to echo across the fairgrounds and pawing at the dirt as if it were digging itself into battle stance. Even the announcer stepped back, clearing his throat as he tried to keep the show moving. That was when someone brought up the old man. It started as a quiet suggestion, just a comment from someone standing near the back of the crowd. They said he lived near the edge of town where the land dipped into a dry creek bed. They said he still worked the little patch of land he had left, even though his body had grown stiff with age. Most folks had not seen him in months, some not in years, but everyone knew his reputation. They said he had once trained horses no one else dared to touch. They said he had a way of looking at an animal and understanding it before even stepping close. People turned, eyes scanning the crowd as if expecting him to suddenly appear, but he was not there. Some chuckled, dismissing the idea, saying the old man had probably hung up his saddle long ago. Others remained thoughtful, remembering stories they had heard from their parents and grandparents. Tales of how he had once calmed a wild stallion by simply standing still, or how a horse that had broken every rancher's patience softened under his gentle touch. The announcer, hearing the murmurs, joked about sending someone to fetch the old man. He meant it as humor, but the crowd took it seriously. A few folks volunteered, hurrying off through the fairground gates to find him. The moment carried a strange energy, a mix of doubt and hope. The idea of an elderly man stepping into the ring with a beast like that seemed impossible, ridiculous even. Yet there was something comforting in imagining that someone somewhere still held a kind of quiet wisdom that might reach the untamable horse. While they waited, the animal continued pacing in the ring, its breath sharp, its steps tense. The dust around its hooves rose with each movement, creating a thin haze across the arena. The fairgrounds grew quieter, anticipation building in the silence. Every second that passed stretched longer. Riders who had been humiliated earlier now sat on the fence rails, arms crossed, staring at the horse with a mixture of frustration and awe. Meanwhile, whispers spread. Some said the horse was dangerous, others insisted it was misunderstood. A few ranchers swore they saw fear in the animal's eyes, hidden behind the aggression. And a handful claimed the horse had chosen this fight, refusing to be handled by anyone who approached with force instead of patience. The announcer tried to keep up the energy, reminding everyone about the reward and encouraging anyone brave enough to try. No one stepped forward. It was no longer about money. It was something else now, something deeper. The horse had become a challenge to their pride, their skills, their traditions. It was a test of old American spirit, of grit and respect for the land and the creatures on it. Then movement stirred near the entrance. People turned, squinting against the glare of the afternoon sun. A small figure walked through the fairground gate. He moved slowly, leaning slightly on a weathered cane, his shoulders stooped from years of work. His hat was pulled low, shielding his eyes, and his clothes looked worn but clean. He did not hurry. He did not need to. The crowd parted for him naturally, silently acknowledging the respect he carried. Some folks whispered, pointing subtly. Others simply watched with growing curiosity. The horse stopped pacing. Its ears flicked forward, its body freezing as if it sensed something new. For the first time all day, it did not move to challenge the fence or lash its tail in anger. Instead, it stared at the old man walking toward the ring. The announcer cleared his throat, unsure what to say. But no one needed an introduction. The moment spoke for itself. The old man reached the gate and paused, studying the horse with calm eyes. He did not look afraid. He did not look impressed either. He simply observed, taking in every detail as though reading a story written in the animal's posture. A quiet settled over the entire fairground. Even the restless kids stood still, sensing something important was about to happen. The old man lifted one hand slightly as if greeting the horse from a distance. The animal's breath grew slower. Its muscles eased in a subtle but clear shift. It did not approach. It did not retreat. It just watched him. The old man took one small step forward. The crowd leaned in. The horse lowered its head by the slightest inch, just enough to surprise everyone who had spent the entire morning watching it kick and twist and strike. And in that tense moment, with the fairground silent and the sun beating down, something unexplainable hung in the air. A connection no one understood, but everyone felt. Before the old man made his next move, before anyone could guess what would happen, the announcer took a step back, eyes wide, realizing the crowd was about to witness something they might remember for the rest of their lives. And then, without warning, the horse reacted in a way that made every single person gasp. The story continued from there. But no one forgot the moment when the old man and the untamable horse faced each other, waiting for whatever would happen next. The horse's sudden movement made everyone step back from the fence, some clutching their hats, others gripping the rails tighter as if the boards could protect them from whatever might unfold. The old man didn't flinch. He stood still, steady as a rooted tree, body calm, face unreadable beneath the brim of his hat. The animal had reared up halfway, not in full attack but in a raw show of power, hooves cutting the air before settling again into the dust. The motion shook the ground enough to leave a soft tremble under the crowd's boots. The fairgrounds seemed to hold its breath. People expected the horse to lunge or bolt, yet instead it shifted its weight with a strange mix of tension and curiosity. It wasn't calm, but it wasn't wild the way it had been earlier. Something had changed, something subtle but unmistakable. Folks whispered among themselves, wondering whether the old man had some secret the rest of them didn't understand. He lifted his hand again, slower this time, palm open. A small movement, yet it carried a gentleness strong enough to reach the edge of the ring. The horse's ears twitched forward, trying to place the intention behind that gesture. Dust drifted between them, swirling lazily in the late afternoon light, making the moment feel suspended outside of time. The old man finally stepped through the gate, not waiting for permission, not asking for approval. The latch clicked softly as it swung shut behind him. Some spectators gasped, Others muttered warnings under their breath. Several ranchers exchanged uneasy glances. They had all seen what happened to trained men who tried to get close to that horse. And now an elder, moving slower than any rider before him, was walking straight into danger without a saddle, rope, or even a stick. But the old man's steps were steady. He didn't rush toward the horse. He didn't challenge it. He walked with the quiet patience of someone who had spent a lifetime around animals and knew they read more than a person's posture. They read fear, pride, frustration. They listened to the rhythm of a heartbeat long before they cared about a voice. Some people in the crowd began sharing what they knew about him. A woman with gray hair said he had once been known across 3 counties for breaking the toughest horses. A rancher near the back claimed he used to travel, helping folks calm troubled animals. Others had heard that after losing most of his land to drought years earlier, he moved into a small cabin far from town, living alone except for a mule and 2 old dogs. The stories varied, but all pointed to the same truth. He didn't come to the fairgrounds for money or praise. He came because someone asked for help, and he still believed in answering when he could. The horse watched him with sharp, restless eyes. Its nostrils quivered as it caught the old man's scent. Its muscles kept shifting, not in anger, but in a kind of nervous anticipation. It took a single step sideways, hooves scraping the ground. The old man mirrored the movement with a slow sidestep, matching the rhythm, not closing the distance too fast. People barely noticed the way he adjusted his body angle, turning just enough to appear less threatening while still facing the animal. It was a dance of sorts, one built on patience rather than force. A young cowboy standing near the front whispered to his friend that this was going to end badly. He couldn't imagine someone that frail handling a horse that strong. Yet he couldn't look away. No one could. The tension around the ring felt thick, heavy enough to press on people's chests. The old man finally stopped a few paces from the horse. He lowered his hand. The crowd thought he was giving up, but then he spoke. His voice carried softly across the arena, not loud but clear. He wasn't talking to the horse like someone giving commands. He was talking around it, sharing words meant to ease the air between them. He said animals needed time, needed understanding, needed the chance to breathe long enough to decide whether they felt safe. No one in the ring had tried that approach earlier. Every rider had walked in eager to prove themselves, eager to show strength. The old man offered something different. He offered space. The horse lowered its head again, a fraction more than before. The movement spread a quiet murmur through the crowd. Even the announcer leaned over the railing, forgetting the script in his hand. A mix of hope and disbelief filled the fairgrounds. Folks held their breath as the old man inched a tiny bit closer, barely shifting his weight so it wouldn't startle the horse. Despite the calm he projected, there was a tension under the surface. He might have looked composed, but the risk was real. One unexpected lash, one quick twist, and he could be knocked to the dirt. The animal had thrown strong, capable riders. This moment could turn dangerous at any second. The old man's bravery was almost unsettling, and everyone sensed just how fragile the line was between harmony and chaos. The horse flicked its tail, a sharp motion signaling that its nerves were still high. It let out a short breath, almost like a warning. The old man paused, letting the space settle again. He shifted his gaze, not locking eyes directly with the animal but keeping it in his periphery. Slowly he crouched, lowering himself just enough to make his body language softer. The crowd tensed, whispering anxiously. Crouching near a volatile horse seemed reckless to them, yet the old man moved with the confidence of someone who had done this many times before. He reached into his coat and took something out, though people at the fence couldn't see what it was. The horse noticed immediately. Its ears shot back for a second, then forward again as it strained to understand. The old man opened his hand, revealing what looked like a small piece of dried apple. A simple thing, but it changed the air. The horse stretched its neck forward, nostrils flaring, testing the scent. A couple of ranchers shook their heads, saying a treat wouldn't fix anything. They didn't understand. It wasn't the apple that mattered, it was the gesture. The old man was offering trust first instead of demanding it. He didn't force the horse to come to him. He simply held his hand open, letting the animal decide. For a long moment, nothing happened. The horse's breath came faster. The old man remained still. The crowd barely dared to breathe. Then the horse stepped closer, one careful hoof in front of the other. It paused halfway, considering. Then it moved again. The distance closed to just a few feet. A young girl near the fence gasped so loud her mother hushed her quickly. But the horse didn't spook. It kept moving, drawn forward by something deeper than hunger. When it finally reached the old man's hand, it didn't snatch the treat. It sniffed, slow and unsure, before taking a small nibble. People stared in disbelief. The old man didn't rush to touch the horse. He allowed the moment to unfold on its own, letting the animal control the pace. The horse's breathing steadied. Its tail flicked again, but this time softer. Its stance loosened. The old man finally reached out, fingers brushing lightly along the horse's muzzle. A ripple of sighs rolled through the crowd, but the tension didn't disappear, far from it. Something deeper stirred beneath the surface, something that left people uneasy even as they watched the gentling of the animal. A few ranchers exchanged looks that held both wonder and concern. They knew this wasn't a complete change, it wasn't victory. It was the beginning of something unpredictable. The announcer stepped toward the ring as if ready to declare something, but he stopped mid-step. The horse suddenly stiffened again, pulling its head back. It snorted loudly, stamping its hoof hard enough to send dust flying. The old man's hand remained raised, calm but ready. Whatever had unsettled the animal wasn't clear. Maybe a sound from the crowd. Maybe a smell carried on the breeze. Maybe a memory. Whatever it was, the shift was sharp enough to remind everyone the danger was far from gone. The horse stepped sideways, agitated again. The old man did not chase it. He stayed still, speaking softly. The horse paced, unsure, torn between fear and the strange comfort it had just tasted. People whispered urgent questions. What had triggered the shift? Would the horse turn wild again? Could the old man still control the situation? No one knew. No one even dared to guess. But before the horse made its next move, before the old man chose to step forward or step back, something unexpected stirred near the far end of the fairgrounds. A new sound carried across the dust, low and steady, like another presence approaching. Heads turned. The horse lifted its head sharply, ears locking toward the sound. Something, or someone, was coming. And whatever it was, the reaction in the horse's eyes made it clear the next moment would change everything again, in ways no one standing there could have predicted. The old man stayed by the fence long after the crowd settled down from the commotion of the last failed attempt. Dust hung in the warm air, drifting in slow waves across the rodeo grounds. The untamable horse stood at the center of it all, pacing in tight circles, its muscles tight and its eyes wide with a wild fire that made even the bravest riders keep their distance. No one dared step inside again. Not after the way the horse had tossed the last challenger high enough that the crowd gasped before he landed in the dirt. The murmurs moved like ripples through the stands. Folks kept repeating what they had seen every year. No rider had managed to stay on longer than a few seconds. Some swore the horse had a sixth sense for anyone trying to get near. Others said the animal carried a wound deeper than its scars. Whatever it was, the horse kept its reputation strong. And the townspeople treated it like a legend, something between danger and mystery. The old man watched steadily. His boots were worn from years of ranch work, and his hands bore the marks of rope, rains, and hard seasons. A few people near him whispered about how he had been gone from public life for so long. Some said he used to be one of the best horsemen in the region. Others weren't sure if that was true or just one of those stories people tell to keep things interesting. Either way, he was the only one looking at the horse with something other than fear or frustration. The young rider who had been thrown earlier tried to laugh it off with his friends, but his shaking legs betrayed him. The crowd turned their eyes toward the entrance gate again, wondering who would try next. No one moved. Even the announcer seemed unsure how to fill the silence. He called out reminders that the prize money was still on the table, that the event was supposed to be the highlight of the fair. But the words sounded thin against the wild snorting of the horse. The old man finally pushed away from the fence and walked toward the corral. A few heads lifted. People nudged each other and tried to guess what he was thinking. He didn't walk with any swagger. He didn't act like he was answering some grand challenge. His steps were slow and patient, like he was approaching an old friend he hadn't seen in years. The horse noticed him right away. Its ears flicked forward, and it stopped its restless pacing long enough to study the stranger walking in. The handlers rushed toward the old man, warning him not to get closer, reminding him that the horse was dangerous. He nodded politely but kept moving. An uneasy hush swept through the stands as if the entire fairground held its breath. The old man stepped inside the gate. He didn't rush toward the horse, didn't try to rope it or show off. He just watched it with a calm look that made some of the younger cowboys shift uncomfortably. They were used to loud commands and quick reactions. This quiet approach felt unpredictable, almost unsettling. The horse pawed at the ground and tossed its head sharply. The old man didn't flinch. He let the horse circle him, let it test the air between them. The sunlight caught the horse's mane, throwing streaks of gold across its powerful frame. It had the kind of presence that belonged to something born free, not meant for show arenas or competitions. People leaned forward, expecting a sudden charge or another violent outburst. Instead, the horse slowed. Only a little, but enough for the crowd to feel the shift. The handlers glanced at each other, whispering about how the animal had never acted this way with anyone before. The old man reached for nothing. His hands stayed open and low. The horse's breathing eased, though its eyes still carried that deep, wild tension. It took another careful step toward him, then another. From the stands came a faint gasp. The old man said a few quiet words that no one else could hear. The horse flicked an ear toward his voice, still cautious but not aggressive. Dust lifted around their feet, creating a haze that made the moment feel almost unreal. The announcer finally found his voice again and reminded the crowd that no one else had been allowed inside while the horse was loose. Yet here the old man stood alone, closer to the animal than anyone else had managed in years. Whispers spread fast across the wooden benches. People wondered whether the horse had recognized him somehow. Some speculated that he had trained wild horses before. Others guessed that maybe he just didn't have anything left to lose. But there was something deeper in the old man's quiet movements, something that suggested more than skill. It felt like he understood the horse in a way that didn't need words or ropes. The crowd could sense it even if they couldn't explain it. The horse stepped closer, almost close enough for the old man to touch. But it stopped again and lifted its head sharply, sensing something that put it back on edge. The old man didn't push. He let the moment settle, letting the horse decide what came next. Around them, tension tightened like a rope pulled at both ends. People kept waiting for a sign of what the horse would do. The fairgrounds that had been filled with noise earlier now felt wrapped in thick silence. Even the announcer stayed quiet, unsure whether to interrupt or let the scene unfold. Behind the old man, a couple of young ranchers studied him with a mix of curiosity and annoyance. They had spent days trying to conquer the untamable horse. Seeing an older stranger walk in so calmly made them uncomfortable. One muttered under his breath that the old man must be reckless. Another wondered if he was simply trying to steal the spotlight. But the old man wasn't looking for attention. His focus stayed entirely on the horse. The deep brown eyes of the animal held something heavy, something like old pain mixed with raw instinct. It wasn't just defiance. It was history. Anyone paying attention could sense that. The old man breathed slowly, almost matching his rhythm to the horse's. The crowd watched every small movement. They couldn't explain why the horse seemed drawn toward him despite all its rage earlier. The tension grew thicker as each second passed. A gust of wind swept across the arena, lifting loose straw and brushing against the old man's coat. The horse reacted with a sudden jerk of its head. It stomped hard, sending a warning thud through the dirt. A few people flinched, expecting the calm moment to collapse into chaos. The old man stayed steady. He lowered his gaze, showing he wasn't challenging the horse. The animal hesitated again, muscles tight, tail flicking with frustration and uncertainty. It was clear to everyone that something in this moment mattered deeply, even if they didn't yet know why. The horse finally made its choice. It stepped forward, closing the last small gap between them. Its warm breath brushed the old man's hand, and for the first time in years, it allowed a human close enough to see the sharp mix of fear and strength in its eyes. But just when the crowd thought the moment might turn peaceful, a loud clang rang from the far side of the arena. A loose metal gate slammed in the wind. The sudden noise broke the fragile calm. The horse leapt back, rearing with explosive force. Dust burst upward. The crowd erupted with shouts of fear. The handlers rushed forward again, but the old man lifted a hand, telling them not to interfere. The horse bolted across the corral with wild energy, kicking up dirt, smashing through the moment of near trust. People grabbed the railings. The announcer yelled for everyone to stay back. The old man's steady expression shifted only slightly, but the spark of danger lit the air again. And the crowd realized the quiet moment was over. Something bigger was about to unfold. Something no one expected. The wind carried the echo of the metal clang long after it faded, and the horse tore across the corral with a force that shook the ground. Dust rolled behind it like smoke. People stumbled back from the fence, their nerves rattled, unsure whether this wild burst of energy would send the animal charging into the rails again. The old man stood in the center of the arena, watching the movement closely. His calm was still there, but now it had a different edge to it, something more focused, almost like he had been waiting for this exact moment. The handlers leaned toward the gate, ready to rush in and drag the old man out, fearing he would be hurt. But he raised a slow hand without taking his eyes off the horse. The signal stopped them in their tracks. They exchanged uneasy looks, unsure how he expected to handle the situation alone. The announcer tried to call for order, but even his voice cracked as he tried to speak over the frantic rumbling of hooves. The horse kept running in fast circles, switching directions every few seconds, throwing its weight around with pure instinct. It wasn't just fear now. Something deeper had been stirred. The horse had always been unpredictable, but this sudden burst of panic was different. It had been close to trusting the old man a moment ago. The noise had broken that fragile moment, and the animal was fighting that confusion with raw strength. The stands were full, but the silence was heavy, broken only by the horse's sharp breaths and the pounding of hooves. People were glued to the scene, knowing things were reaching a turning point. The old man didn't back away, didn't shout, didn't try to corner the horse. He just took a few slow steps toward the path the horse kept taking, watching the rhythm, searching for the moment when instinct might give way to understanding again. Every rider who had tried before had moved with force. They had relied on speed, ropes, confidence, and skill, but the horse had thrown all of them off, showing no mercy. The old man's approach was different. He wasn't there to prove anything or show strength. People could see it now. He was watching the horse with something like empathy, something that made the animal pause earlier. The crowd whispered among themselves, trying to understand what made him so calm when anyone else would be terrified. The horse slowed for a split second, then bolted again. The old man adjusted his stance, not stepping back but shifting in a way that signaled he was giving room. That small gesture made the horse take a wider turn instead of charging straight at him. Gasps echoed across the arena. The handlers were ready to jump in if something went wrong, but every time they thought the old man was done for, he moved just right to give the horse space without losing connection. The tension climbed, stretching tight across the entire fairground. Everyone knew the event had reached a point where things could either explode or transform entirely. The horse had never been pushed into such a moment of choice before. Its muscles shivered with both exhaustion and defiance. The old man could see it. His slow breaths matched the horse's uneven ones, as if he was guiding it without touching it. The horse came to a sudden stop at the far end of the arena. It lowered its head, not in defeat but in confusion. It pawed the dirt again, marking the ground with frustration. People leaned in closer. Some whispered that the horse was giving in. Others warned that it was preparing to charge harder than ever. The old man started walking forward again. His boots sank into the soft dirt step by step. The horse watched him closely. This time it didn't back away. It held its ground, tense but still. The old man raised both hands slowly, showing he had nothing to hide. The sunlight warmed the arena, highlighting the dust floating between them. The air felt thick, like everyone was waiting for lightning to strike. Then a sound came from near the stands. A little kid had climbed onto the lower rail and accidentally knocked over a wooden bucket. The hollow clatter echoed across the arena. The horse jolted, its entire body tightening. It swung its head, startled again. The crowd groaned, expecting another wild outburst, but the old man reacted instantly. He stepped forward, not fast enough to alarm the horse, but quick enough to draw its attention back. He murmured something low. Whatever he said wasn't meant for anyone else. It was only for the horse. The animal's ears twitched. Its eyes darted around, then settled on the old man again. People in the crowd held on to the rails, watching the strange connection deepen. A cowboy near the fence muttered that this didn't make sense. He had spent years breaking horses, had seen every kind of behavior, but nothing like this. Another rancher shook his head and said the horse must have some history with the old man. Someone else suggested the old man had handled wild mustangs in the plains years ago. Rumors swirled as the moment grew even tighter. The horse took a small step toward him, then another. Its tail swished in uncertain movements. The old man stopped walking and waited. Dust drifted between them like floating pieces of time. People leaned in so far that the wooden seats creaked beneath them. The horse lowered its head slightly. Its breathing steadied. The old man reached out just enough for the horse to notice the gesture without feeling trapped. The animal hesitated, then stepped closer. Its nose brushed his hand for the first time since the panic had started. A wave of shock went through the spectators. Some people covered their mouths. Others whispered in disbelief. But right when the moment felt like it might turn peaceful again, the loudspeaker above the announcer's booth crackled sharply. A burst of static shot through the air, jarring and abrupt. The horse reared with a fierce cry. The old man had no time to step back. The animal landed hard, its hooves stamping the ground with a force that made the boards of the fence vibrate. The crowd cried out, the announcer ducked. Handlers screamed for help. People thought the horse was about to strike the old man. But he didn't move, not even a little. He held his ground with a steady posture that shocked everyone. The horse froze, towering over him, breathing hard, eyes wild and unsure. The old man slowly lifted his hand again, palm open, steady as a mountain. The horse stared at him, trembling. This was the turning point everyone could feel but didn't understand. The noise, the panic, the chaos had pushed the horse to its limit. And yet, despite all that wild force, it hadn't struck him. It could have. It didn't. The tension reached its highest point. Every person in the stands stopped breathing. The old man and the horse stood in a moment balanced so tightly that even the smallest movement could decide everything. The horse let out a long breath. Its muscles loosened just a little, its head lowered. The old man slowly reached forward again. The animal didn't pull back this time. It stayed. Calm crept back into the arena in tiny pieces. But no one dared celebrate. Not yet. Everyone knew this wasn't over. The horse was still on edge. The fairground was one noise away from disaster. The handlers were frozen, waiting for a signal. The crowd was caught in the tension of not knowing what would happen next. The old man took another slow breath. His hand brushed the horse's neck. The crowd whispered in stunned disbelief. The horse shifted its weight, still unsure, still tense, but not fighting. The old man kept talking softly, his voice steady. Even though the moment looked calmer, people could sense the story was reaching the peak before something huge happened. The horse wasn't fully tamed. Not yet. The fear in its eyes was still deep. The fairground was still full of risk. And the old man was still in the middle of it all with nothing between him and danger but trust that hadn't fully formed. Everyone waited for the next move, the moment that would change everything and determine whether the wild horse would finally accept what the old man was offering or break loose again with even more force. The calm before the final shift felt like the tightest string a bow had ever held, pulled back far past its limit, waiting for the release that would send the story racing toward its climax. The old man kept his hand pressed lightly against the horse's neck, feeling the tremble beneath the warm hide. The horse's breath still came uneven, but its body no longer jerked with fear. It was the kind of moment that could tip forward into calm or crash back into chaos, and everyone watching could sense that delicate balance. The air felt thick, as if the entire fairground was holding its breath. The old man could see the wildness still flickering in the horse's eyes, but something else was there too. A question, maybe even a hope? The handlers shifted behind the rail, unsure if they should rush in or stay back. They had never seen a horse go from fury to hesitation so fast. The old man kept his other hand low, letting the horse choose what would happen next. Every movement he made was gentle, slow, careful. He stood close enough for connection but far enough to avoid pressure. The horse's ears flicked back and forth, searching through the noise of the fairground for signs of danger. A soft breeze moved across the arena, lifting the dust. The horse took another step, closer this time, almost brushing against the old man's shoulder. The crowd watched with wide eyes, not daring to speak. No one wanted to break the fragile moment. The old man let his fingers trace a slow path along the horse's cheek. The animal leaned into the touch, not fully, but enough to show it was trying. Then the loudspeaker crackled again, this time a softer sound, but enough to make the horse jump slightly. Instead of bolting, it pressed its head against the old man's chest. Gasps spread across the stands. The old man steadied himself, his boots sinking deeper into the soft dirt. His calm voice rose again, low and steady, offering comfort that traveled straight through the horse's panic. The announcer shut off the microphone in a hurry, not even apologizing. No one cared about the program, the schedule, or the next event. Everyone was focused on the man and the wild horse. The animal's breathing slowed. Its muscles relaxed bit by bit, until the tension that had held it tight finally began to melt away. The horse lowered its head again, this time in a way that held no fear. The old man moved his hand to its forehead, letting it feel the warmth of his touch. The crowd exhaled together, a wave of relief rolling across the arena. For the first time since the event began, they could see possibility instead of danger. A cowboy near the fence whispered that he had never seen anything like this. Another nodded in agreement. Even the most experienced ranchers knew the old man had done something rare. He had won the trust of a horse that had rejected every rider, every trainer, every person who tried to control it. He had done it without force or pride. He had done it with patience, kindness, and understanding. The horse nudged the old man gently, like it was acknowledging something important. He smiled, not a wide smile, but a soft one that showed quiet gratitude. He placed a simple rope over the horse's neck, not tightening it, just letting it rest there. The horse didn't flinch. It accepted the touch without pulling away. The crowd erupted into applause. It wasn't loud or chaotic, it was warm, carried by respect. People rose from their seats, some even wiped their eyes. The old man didn't wave or bow. He kept his attention on the horse, guiding it slowly across the arena. The horse followed, not forced, not pushed, but choosing to stay close. Outside the corral, the fairground workers opened the gate. Sunlight spilled over the entrance, casting a long shadow behind the horse as it stepped through. The old man walked at its side. Children ran toward the fence to get a closer look. Parents held them back gently, wanting the moment to stay peaceful. Once outside the arena, the horse let out a long breath, almost like a sigh. It shook its mane and lifted its head with a calm that surprised everyone nearby. A ranch owner approached the old man and tried to speak, but he had to clear his throat first. He asked if the old man planned to sell the horse or hand it off to a professional trainer. The old man shook his head. He said the horse didn't need to be broken. It needed to be understood. The ranch owner nodded slowly, realizing there was nothing more to argue. Word spread quickly around the fairground that the old man had changed the fate of a horse everyone else had given up on. Hours later, when the fair came to an end, people walked through the grounds talking about what they had witnessed. Some said the old man had a gift. Others believed the horse had been waiting its whole life for someone who spoke its language. The story traveled from booth to booth, from rancher to traveler, turning into one of those tales that would live in people's memories for years. The old man took the horse back to his small ranch at the edge of the valley. The land was quiet, surrounded by rolling hills and soft grass. It was the kind of place where a wild animal could breathe and heal. When the horse stepped into the open pasture, it looked around as if it had never seen space so welcoming. The old man opened the rope and let it fall away. The horse didn't run. It walked slowly into the field, stopping near a patch of shade. In the following days, the horse explored its new surroundings, but always returned to the old man. They settled into a peaceful rhythm. The horse learned to trust the world again, and the old man grew even more patient. taking joy in every small step the animal made toward confidence. Neighbors visited to see the horse that had caused such a stir at the fair. They expected it to be tense or wild, but they found a calm and curious creature that stood close to the old man like they had known each other forever. One morning, the horse trotted across the field with a lightness no one had seen before. It pushed its head into the old man's shoulder as if inviting him to walk. He placed a gentle hand on its mane and whispered that he knew. He saddled the horse for the first time, moving slowly, making sure the animal understood there was no pressure, no demand. When he mounted, the horse didn't jump or resist. It stood steady, accepting the weight like it had expected this moment all along. They rode out together across the valley, moving through the golden grass. The old man didn't push the horse to run. He let it choose the pace. Soon the horse picked up speed, not in fear, but in freedom. The wind swept over them, carrying the joy of that shared trust. By the time they returned to the ranch, the horse's coat glistened under the sunlight. The old man brushed its neck, grateful for the journey they had taken. He knew the horse had changed him just as much as he had changed the horse. The wildness was not gone. It had transformed into strength and courage, something that made the bond even more meaningful. The story reached far beyond their small valley. Travelers passing through asked about the horse. Some said they had heard the old man could gentle a wild creature without force. Others said the horse had become a symbol of second chances. The old man never claimed anything special. He simply said that patience, respect, and understanding could open doors strength never would. With time, the horse grew into a companion that stood by him through every season. They worked the land together, rode through storms, and watched the changing sky in quiet moments. The fairground incident faded into memory, but the lesson stayed alive in every rancher who heard the story. People spoke about trust, gentleness, and the power of calm, using the tale as a reminder that even the wildest hearts can find peace with the right guidance. The old man grew older, but the horse stayed by his side, loyal and steady. The valley became a place where neighbors brought young horses to learn patience and understanding. The old man helped anyone who asked, teaching that the bond between a person and a horse was built from time, respect, and shared courage. As years passed, the story of the untamable horse and the quiet old man lived on. It carried a message that settled deep in people's hearts, reminding them that strength wasn't always loud, that healing wasn't always fast, and that trust, once earned, became one of the most powerful forces in the old American land. The old man often looked out across the valley, watching the horse graze with calm steps. He felt grateful that he had been there that day at the fair, grateful that he had chosen to listen instead of force, and grateful that life had given him a chance to help a soul that only needed understanding. Their story didn't end with applause from a crowd. It continued every quiet morning, every peaceful ride, every shared breath under the wide western sky. It was a reminder that even the wildest moments can lead to the happiest endings when hearts learn to trust again.